Okay, we have 2 secant squared of x minus 2 secant squared of x sine squared of x minus sine squared of x minus cosine squared of x equals 1. I encourage you to try this problem on your own. I was able to do it in 5 steps. So I was able to verify this identity in 5 steps. And I'll give you a hint. If you don't want the hint, press pause now. The hint is that you need to think about factoring by grouping. Okay? So, when I read this problem, I noticed that there were 4 terms. There's 2 terms, and then there's 2 terms. And when I read this problem out loud, I noticed that I was saying the same thing in the first 2 terms, and then the same thing in the last 2 terms. Actually, I wasn't saying the same thing in the last 2 terms other than the negative. I was saying minus, minus. That was common in the last 2 terms. So the first 2 terms, what do they have in common? They have a 2 and they have a secant squared. So I'm going to take 2 secant squared of x and factor it out of those first 2 terms. And then what's that going to leave us? When we factor that out, we get 1 minus sine squared of x. The next 2 terms, they have a minus sign in common. So I factored out a negative 1. Let's do that in white or gray. And then in blue, what's left over? Well, when we factor out the negative, we have sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. Well, those don't look like the same thing. They don't look like the same thing at all. But they do get us somewhere because sine 1 minus sine squared, that's cosine squared, right? Let's use a different color. I'm going to highlight now. This right here is cosine squared. And this one over here is even better. It's 1. So we've got 2 secant squared of x times cosine squared of x, because 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared, minus 1 times 1. And why is that 1? Because sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. So step 3, we have 2 secant squared is the same thing as 1 over cosine squared of x. And then we have times cosine squared of x minus 1 equals 1. The cosine squareds are going to cancel out. That's going to give us 2 minus 1 equals 1. And our 5th step, 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 is identical to 1. So the left-hand side is now identical to the right-hand side. So don't stop short at step 4. You got to go all the way to step 5 and show that 1 equals 1.